recording easily later. It's a little tricky with Zoom because I have to save it and then upload it. And if someday I decide not to continue paying for premium Zoom, then I won't have that ability anymore. So I'm gonna learn to be a YouTuber. Here it comes. Access recording easily later. It's a little tricky to do, but I have to save it. Right. There we go. Now it looks like I'm sharing to YouTube. So this YouTube Live is La Casita Basic Bookmaking Workshop. I don't know if I have, like, if my account on YouTube says Wayfair and Painter or what. I basically set this up, like, through Zoom, having a YouTube channel, so I'm doing this in a little bit of a strange way. But if you're watching from home and you want to check out YouTube, I mean, if you're on Zoom, don't also go to YouTube. I'm mostly saying this for my kids at home. Jesus, Brenna, whoever's with my children right now, or anybody who just wants to save this and bookmark it for later, see if you can find it. Basic Bookmaking Workshop, La Casita. Just gonna wait a little moment longer for everybody to come in. And right now what you should be seeing is a little rectangle up in the corner of the screen that has my face, and then my body sitting on the side of the table here that I'm going to be working on in a moment. All right. Let me go ahead and pause my music. And so, welcome to La Casita, Basic Bookmaking. We're going to be making 3 different styles of books today. They are an accordion book that folds out into a little house. This is just the one that I made right this morning. It's not colored in on the inside yet, but I did add this sweet little window here. This is one that I made as a sample last week, and this filled in with all the different little pages of the rooms in one's casita. So that's almost, I would say, the trickiest, honestly. I think that this accordion book, even though it's the first type of book I ever learned to make as an art teacher, and often accordion books aren't too hard to make, this one is a little bit tricky because we're working with a lot of folds that have to sit together. So it is a little bit more like origami almost. The pamphlet book, you can make pamphlet books with anything, any types of cover, any type of design. This one I made to look like a little house with a window, but you don't have to. This is one that I just made out of a piece of tag board that my kids and husband sketched on at home. So pamphlet binding is like a great first book binding to learn. And then the festival book. In the festival book, like I mentioned, if you saw my little live chat on YouTube or on Facebook last night, this is something that I learned when I was going to school at UF in the art ed program, and we made these for the Downtown Art Festival every year. So we would cut a whole bunch of cardboard, so much cardboard, and we would just make these on the fly and let kids, depending on their level and comfort with using a stapler, we would let kids make these or assist them along with it. These are awesome to make in situations like that where you have to make a lot of books really quickly, and also for classrooms, because all you really need is cardboard, paper, stapler. So these are going to be the 3 types of books that I'm going to demonstrate today. But before we get into the bookmaking, I also want to talk about why our house is important. Why was it important to the artists we're inspired by, Emilio Sanchez, to draw and paint architecture? Why do we see houses and buildings repeated over and over again throughout the history of art? So it's something to consider. What is the meaning of place, especially now that we're all stuck in our homes and in a few different buildings with not a lot of other places to distract from our focus on our homes and our neighborhoods. I wanted to be really generous about what that feeling is right now. So I took a class when I was at FIU in my undergrad that was called Art and Shamanism. And I really didn't know what to expect, but I really loved the professor. He was a professor of pre-Columbian art, and I had taken a few of his classes. And this was like a summer class, and he promised we were going to watch movies and, dig into like some fun projects. And the first thing that he told us about shamanism was that, it's a term that gets thrown around a lot in culture and in history. But he really wanted us to consider shamanism as being an expert of your environment. And what we had to do was to create a sketchbook that was recording only things about our environment for the whole summer semester. He wanted us to make maps of our neighborhood. He wanted us to record, what are the colors like at your home at different hours of the day? What are the plants in your yard? What stores are nearby you? Who owns those stores? What do you know about your neighborhood? And knowing all of this information about your environment, it's just a great tool for becoming a more observant person and to be able to imbibe in your artwork these, really deep and personal elements. So a house is not always just a house. And even when we ask children, that was one of the things my mom always used to say. We would ask, what should we draw? And she would always say a house. And even as kids, when you ask kids to draw a house, there are so many things that you can learn about them from them drawing their house. So some questions that we can ask. Sorry, I'm referring to a link here that's not popping up. There's no link. Okay. Some conversation questions for home, and this is a link that I found. I'll post it on Facebook. Conversation questions for the ESL classroom. Can you describe each room of your house? So before we get started on bookmaking, let's center ourselves in our homes. Probably lots of you are at your homes right now. Can you describe each room of your house? What does the outside of your house look like? Where do you park your car at your house? Do you like the place you are living? Why or why not? What is your favorite room in your house and why? How are homes different in your home country and in this country? Maybe that's the same for you. How have you changed your home in the past year? How long have you lived where you're living now? How many different homes have you lived in? Which one did you like the best? Why? Which room in your house do you spend the most time in? How could you live without electricity? What would you do? How would all of your rooms in your home be different if you did not have electricity? What kind of housing would you prefer? What's the color of your front door? Just some things to get us thinking about colors, about what you can observe and describe in your casita today. So I'm going to start off with the accordion book. Like I said, it is kind of the trickiest, and it also requires glue. So there's going to be some time, some dry time. So while we assemble this one and let it dry, we'll jump to some other things. So for this casita book, we're going to need 4 sheets of regular 8.5 by 11 paper. You're also going to need something for your cover. It can be another piece of 8.5 by 11 paper. You don't even have to put a separate cover if you don't want to. But I chose just like a piece of tag board, and then a piece of colored paper or another piece of paper for the top. So really 5 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper. One of those sheets can be a piece of cardboard. One of those sheets can be a different colored paper, a piece of a magazine, anything, just so we can have some contrast for the roof of your house. So with my 4 sheets of 8.5 by 11, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square them. So I'm just bringing this corner up to the side. I'm going to make sure this makes a perfect triangle here. You'll also need some scissors and some glue for this project. It looks like everybody is muted right now. If you don't want to be muted, if you want to talk to me, please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. You can do that. I don't think I have everybody muted on purpose. Yeah, I think everybody can unmute themselves if they want to. So feel free. When I was making this sample this morning, Angelo, my son, my 4-year-old, took these little extra side pieces and he turned them into tickets. So always good to keep little scrap papers around. I'm a paper holder though, so maybe don't listen to me. So now we have these are all 4 little squares. They are already folded in half diagonal, and we're going to go ahead and fold them all on the opposite diagonal. So this way. And then again, we're going to open them up so that they're squares, and we're going to fold them now into quarters. So inside each square now you have an X and a plus. So each you have 8 small triangles. Probably could have pre-folded these all and not shown you guys this step. And that's so disorienting for me when I'm watching YouTube tutorials or how to do little craft things, and then suddenly the person has like 4 perfectly folded sections. I know that they're trying to just be economical for time, but it really messes me up. I would rather see the things sped up than like shortcuts and then suddenly you don't know what happened. Okay. Now for each of these guys, I'm going to cut 2 at a time. I'm just going to cut along 1/4, so I have kind of this little pair of pants here. Pair of shorts, maybe. I'm going to be using a pH neutral PVA glue today. I don't need to. I am not planning on keeping these books forever and ever, or they're not archival or really like fine art books. But if your book is, and if you are creating an archival book that you really is very important and you don't want it to get damaged over the years, using a PVA glue, pH neutral glue is suggested. I know that there are glues that are like PVA glues that are available, at regular stores, craft stores, and things like that. I just don't 100% know what they are. So I just went on Amazon and chose the thing that is the bookmaking archival glue. At home, when I did this, I just used Elmer's. You can use a glue stick. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue down on the left side of my pants. And then I'm going to lay the right side of my pants down onto that left. This is one of my rooms. So you have a floor and 2 walls right now. Make sure all my corners are really, really as close together as possible because it's going to make folding easier later. Ugh, I think I liked working with the Elmer's glue better. This is very sticky. And a lot comes out. Okay, second round. Third round. It's good when you're working with glue and paper projects like bookmaking or collage or anything. Keep like a little paper towel nearby you, a damp paper towel or a damp, like washcloth or something, so you can wipe off these little glue bits. It can really, leave little streaks, little goofy bits on your paper. All right, so I have my 4 rooms now. I kind of arrange them, lay them out with their back walls to each other. And my next step is that I'm going to glue these together. I'm going to glue 1, 2, 3 sides. And this outer side here is not going to get glued together because that's how your book is going to close. Made that mistake the first time. I got so excited assembling this little house that I made it into not a book anymore. So now I'm putting glue on the backs. And I really, really want to get these as close together on the corners and edges as possible. And we're gluing, again, the walls together. We're not gluing the floors together. You can tell your floor is your floor because it's already 2 layers. We're just gluing the walls together. And the last wall. Okay. So I'm going to set this aside. I don't want to try to really fold it right now while it's wet. That can just lead to my paper getting too wrinkly, and I'm just going to let it dry for a few moments while we move on to the pamphlet binding. So this is to make a book that looks like this. You can do pamphlet binding, I think, at least 10 or so pages within 1 stitch. In bookmaking, the pages that are held together with 1 stitch like this is called an addition. So you can make multiple additions if you wanted your book to be much thicker. And for most of our long books, that's how they are. Little groups of pages are bound together, or they're bound onto the spine of the book. So for the pamphlet book, I'm going to also use 8.5 by 11 paper. You can do this with whatever size you want, but working with generic sizes, standard sizes, is going to be a little bit easier because your numbers won't get so fuzzy. So I'm going to not worry about that. I'm going to use folding instead. Some sharp knife. All right. I'm going to talk about this again, especially when we are cutting cardboard, but using a utility knife and a ruler to cut paper and to cut board is probably one of the most valuable things I ever learned in art school. And one of the most important parts about it, and I always emphasize this in my bookmaking classes, is hold tight on the ruler. All of your pressure should be on the hand holding the ruler, not the hand holding the knife. Because if you're using a whole lot of pressure holding, holding the knife, you slip a little, you're going to hit yourself with pressure instead of a gentle hand. So my goal right here is to make sure the ruler doesn't wiggle. It's not to make sure that this knife goes through all 4 layers of paper at the same time. So again, this is my 8.5 by 11 paper, and I'm cutting it in half. Folding my ruler really tight. I'm just gonna go over these papers, score them as many times as I need to until I see that they are separate. I'm gonna stack these guys up. Fold them in half again. I don't have to worry too much about making them perfect right now. This is an optional tool for bookmaking. I like them a lot. Bone folder. This is not made of real bone. This one is just made out of plastic. They're very helpful in getting sharp creases, avoiding, damaging your hands on paper. So, like I said, I don't have to worry too much about this being perfect on the edge right now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim it. And this is called cutting the creep. If you look at this, when you fold a bunch of papers together, there kind of develops this little arrow here. As the pages are stacked up on themselves, that the edge of the page just kind of creeps out into this little arrow shape. So I'm going to cut that off. All of my pages are folded, and I'm just going to trim a very, very tiny bit off the edge of the pages so that they all line up. This is totally optional, but it does make a very tight and neat looking book. All right. So for the cover of your pamphlet binding book, I really like to do funky things with these book covers. This is a piece of tag board that's been hanging around my house, and everybody's been painting and drawing on it for the past couple of weeks. I love keeping things like this and turning them into other stuff. You can also use a cereal box. You can use a piece of felt. You could use fake leather, all really good things that you can use for the binding of your book. Vellum. So I'm going to cut this down. To my half sheet of 8.5 by 11. Just going to trace this. I give myself maybe a little bit of extra room on the outside edge, just so that my book cover is slightly bigger than my book pages. Just checking. Oh, hi, Juanita. I hope there weren't a bunch of other people waiting and I didn't notice. All right. Here's my cover. Fold this guy in half again. Grab the bone folder, especially for this big, heavier weight paper. It's very helpful. It's a good crease. Here's my cover. Check, make sure everything fits, lines up. I could probably cut a little bit more off the edges of these pages, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. What I want to show you next is the actual binding process. So you can use a lot of different things to punch your holes to make your binding. I'm going to use an awl You won't have to use an all. You can also, sorry guys. There we go. I just wanted to make sure you can still see my face when I'm talking. You can also use a push pin. So I'll show kind of both ways to do it. But basically, I'm using a sharp, pointy object. The bookmaking all is really, really sharp, and it will go through more pages at once than you will imagine with less effort than you'll imagine. So I'm just going to make a hole in the middle of my group of pages. And then, you know, a couple finger widths. So 3 pages total for these. 3 holes total. If you wanted to use a push pin, you can use a push pin to make your holes, and I'll just demonstrate on my little scrap paper here. But you might not be able to go through as many layers at a time. You might only want to go through like 2 or 3 layers of paper at the same time. You can use a push pin and you'll get the same result. A nice, clean, sharp hole. I'm going to take just one of my pieces here. I'm going to lay it on top of my cover. And use that as a guide to punch my holes for my cover. So next is the binding. I'm using a large eye needle. These are just available at Walmart. I'm going to be using waxed linen thread. You can use embroidery floss. You can use dental floss. You could use hemp cord. The only thing is that unwaxed thread over time is going to fray with all of the opening and closings of your book. If you're not super worried about, you know, longevity, then you can use something unwaxed. It won't be a big deal. Dental floss usually is waxed, so it's okay for that. But wax thread is the way to go. It also slides through the pages, the paper, a little more easily. I'm just gonna poke my needle through once without the cover, just so I can make sure my pages are in the right order. You know, that they're all stacked up evenly. And I've cut a length of thread that's about 3 times the length of my page. That's way more than I'll need, but just to be certain, that's how much I'm going to use. I'm going to be starting from the inside, because that's where I want my knot to be. If you want your knot to be on the outside, you can start on the outside. I'm starting on the inside. I'll go through, leave a small tail. And this is kind of a little bit tricky because it's white on white here, so you can't totally see. But there's a small tail, maybe 4 inches on the inside. Then I'm going to go to one of the holes, go through. And the shape of this knot is kind of like a pretzel. That always helps me to know if I'm doing it right. You hold it on the side like this, it will look kind of pretzel-y. Then I'm going to skip the middle and go to one on the other side, all the way through to the outside page cover. And then back through this first hole that you made in the middle. There we go. Just going to pull these ends. Let's ram through each other a little bit. Put these guys tops. And just make a knot there. And trim the ends. There you go. I guess I said, you can make these guys in any sizes you want. You can make them full pages with like legal paper. Lots of people bind their zines this way. Pamphlet binding is super, super useful. Reports, all types of stuff. And it gives you a really nice, clean edge. So at this point, I think that our accordion book is dry enough to work with. It's still a little bit wet. I'm not going to want to draw on this probably until later today. But it's definitely dry enough to start folding. So again, I have my core walls here. And on each of these walls, I want to fold my floors up. So in folding and in origami and paper crafts and stuff, there's mountain and valley. So I want these floors to go up. So that's kind of into a mountain fold. My floors are becoming mountains. And I'm going to kind of manipulate it a little bit. I can flip it over and really get like the corner to go in a nice point. My edges nice and lined up. A bone folder is helpful here too, but because it's still kind of gluey, I don't want to use the bone folder too aggressively because the paper can rip. So just one by one little room at a time, and folding the floors up in between the walls. So here's my room with no folded floor. Flip it over, get into that corner. Just guide that fold. Last little room here. Go. And I have a couple of little edges that are not 100% perfect, little corners. You can trim them if it bothers you. But remember, we are going to be putting a cover on the outside, so it's not really a terrible deal. And I'm going to go back to my fancy tag board here. And I want to be making, I'm going to be putting a square again. But I'm only using half of the square this time, so I'm just going to cut myself another square to make a template for the cover of this book. There we go. This is going to be my book size. My cover. Again, I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra room. Measure trees really carefully, so I'm going to cut this with a utility knife instead of a scissor. That's a nice surprise. look back up and make sure that everything's where I want it to be. I'm going to put glue on the front and back sides. Just open it a little bit to make sure these really press down, lined up where I want them to be. There we go. So you could stop here if you did not want this to be a casita. But since it already has rooms, you might as well make it a roof. Maybe it's an apartment building, maybe it doesn't have a roof, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut myself a roof. I'm gonna use this little template that I cut just to make, so I know what length I need to work with. So I'm gonna cut something that's just maybe like half an inch longer than my half square. So half an inch longer than my book cover that we just cut. So I want to account for the roof to be able to hang off the edge a little bit. Let's see if I did it right. Yeah, there we go. Sure. So I'm just going to fold this over, make sure my edges are where I want them to be. And then I will cut the shape for my roof. Nobody in Florida has chimneys. I bet nobody in Cuba has chimneys either, but they're so cute. I mean, no, people in Florida do have chimneys. Sometimes I speak like I'm still in South Florida. Excuse me. My neighbor has a chimney. I was trained not to draw them on my houses. There we go. I like to put a little bit of tape on the inside here. Roof is like a lighter weight paper, so it's maybe like slightly flimsier. You could put any type of tape in there, but I have this nice washi tape, so I'm going to use it. I'm probably going to use that on the outside too. And I'm just going to put a little line of tape from the cover to the roof there, so that holds. I cut it on an angle that looks intentional. I'm going to do the same thing on my front. I'm going to run a little line of tape. Find the beginning of my tape again. Seriously? Okay. Maybe not. Maybe today is not a day for a tape on the front. But as you can see from the one that I made earlier today, you can do all types of things. You can make windows and doors and little accessories on the front of your book. And then once this is dry, like dry, bone dry, there's no, you can't feel any sort of cool to the touch from the glue, any sort of dampness from the glue, you can decorate your rooms. And think about the questions that we talked about earlier. What's your favorite room? What does your front door look like? Maybe not even the house you live in now, but your dream home, or a home that you remember from childhood, or one of the homes painted by our inspiring artist, Emilio Sanchez. So I drew all of those in my house, and this really was kind of fun to do, just like going around and thinking. And it was a really tricky spatial thinking exercise of, all right, here's a corner, and where are things? How can I arrange the items where I know that they are? And sometimes having to make little concessions, you know, for where walls pop out. And so it can be a really, really brain stretching exercise here of perspectives in your home and what you see from, you know, which corners. This can be a really fun dollhouse or something like that too. You can just like put a little paper clip right here, and it'll stay open, and then you have a little area to play. Okay, so 2 books down, 1 to go. I thought that this wasn't gonna, I was hoping this wasn't gonna take more than an hour, and it looks like I'm pretty much on target, so I'm glad for that. I mean, I would sit here and talk about books all day, but I know y'all have places that you need to be. So, I promised we were going to talk more about cutting board and cutting cardboard, and for these festival books, we are. Cardboard is great. It's one of my favorite art teaching tools because there's so much of it. You can always find it, and it's really, you can paint on cardboard with tempera paint. You know, it's sturdy enough to hold a lot of different types of paint. You can build with it. It's just so, you know, such a good art supply to keep on hand. So for these festival books, I'm going to be making these with 12 by 18 inch paper. This is just a size of like size of standard construction paper, or you know, typical classroom drawing paper. So when the book is folded in half, it will be 12 by 9. So I'm going to cut this board down into a 12 by 18 square, or 12 by 18 inch rectangle. I'm just going to kind of make sure my sides are okay, that there's nothing crazy here. This kind of has like already a little bump here. So I don't want to cut across that where there's already a fold. I'm going to try to find an area where there's not too much folding going on. This looks good. I don't really like to cut like across like this. I think that you don't have as much power to make a clean cut. Again, I'm holding the ruler really strong. Oops. So I feel like I'm almost all the way through. I'm going to do a quick cut to the edge here. So I can hold this. I can go in on the inside and finish my cut. Any little places where there might be a piece of paper hanging on still. So I have a really nice clean cut now. Makes me happy. I'm going to do the same thing on the other edges. And this is my 18. Mark. Mark that. Measure over 12. I'm going to give myself like maybe an extra, on the 18 side, I'm going to give myself maybe an extra half an inch or so. So maybe a quarter inch on each side. But the 12 can be pretty, pretty spot on. And I'm going to measure 12 all the way up here since I'm well, mark again, 12. 12. So I know this is 18 inches long here. I know this is 12 inches wide. And I made myself a series of little guide dots. You could make this, marks also with a pencil or something, so that I can lay my ruler against those dots and know that it's even. If I only measured 12 inches once, like in the middle, then I could end up like, yes, this is 12 inches here, but my ruler could be askew a little bit, and then I'm going to end up with not a really straight edge on my book. So make yourself little guide dots. Do a quicker cut on the edge. On this edge. Free this up. Go back in. Put any little clinging on pieces. Right. Same thing, my 18. Give myself maybe a little extra space when I cut. I'm going to go ahead and mark 18 inches of little guide dots all the way up my side. I'm just going to move slightly on top of those dots. Pretty clean enough. So this side, it depends on what you're going to do here. If you know that you're going to cover and really decorate the front of this book, then I would make the messier looking side, or the side with labels and things like that, your front, so that you have a nice clean inner fold. But if you know that either you don't care or that you're going to cover the inside pages, just decide which side you want to be your cover. And then measure, I'm going to find my halfway point, which being that this is roughly 18 inches with maybe a little space. I know that 9 is going to be my middle, and I'm going to mark half an inch on either side. So I'm going to make my mark at 8.5 and to 9.5. I'm going to do that all the way down the center of the book. This is a lot of measuring and cutting, but once you do a few of them, kind of get the hang of it, it becomes methodical. So I did not cut all the way through. I only did one swipe of my knife here because I don't want to actually cut through all of the layers of cardboard right now. Because this is going to be where my book folds. Here we have a really nice little book spine. If you wanted to do something like with the pamphlet binding and you made like a whole bunch of editions of paper and then you wanted to glue them down or sew them into your spine, you definitely could do that. You could use this process for a more traditional bookbinding. But being as this is our festival book, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to peel off these layers of this spine, and I want to get down to like a low bit of corrugation. This is a 1-inch ruler. It should be just about a 1-inch area that I cut here. So sometimes I can wedge my ruler and kind of help get some of these pieces off. Sometimes if you cut the other way, against the corrugation, so that the corrugation is running horizontally instead of vertically. You get a little bit of a cleaner lift of these layers, but it really depends on the type of cardboard, and I've had it work against me both ways. So I just do whatever side looks best for the book. Try not to worry about it too much. But again, I'm not making 500 of them right now, like I did at the Downtown Festival. So when we were making lots and lots of these, we did consistently try to make sure that cardboard was corrugation was lined a certain way. And I might even, well, I think this is enough actually. You could go down another couple of layers, but I think this will be fine. This is a really thick cardboard. Okay. Here and see if I can flatten it a bit. Okay. There we go. Have my 12 by 18 paper. I'm going to use like 6 sheets total. So I'm making 2 editions of 3. Just fold it in half. And then I'm going to think about what shape I want the little roof of my house to be here. So for this one, I kind of went for a traditional roof. Cut a little triangle off this side, triangle off this side. Use my cut off bit to stencil. Guys, here. Sure everything fits the way I want it to. And then I'm going to take this out. So could you sew this? Yes, absolutely. You could do 2 pamphlet stitches in either side of this spine. This little spine here is big enough that you could fit 2 pamphlet stitches right here. But like I said, I'm considering this as a festival book and a really quick, like, get done in 10 minutes at the beginning of class sort of deal. So I'm going to be using a stapler. So I'm going to grab my stapler. And make sure these are pushed all the way in as far as you can get them. Let's see. Yes. There you go. Have a little 4-page notebook. Ready to decorate. Ready to go. This is how my finished one looks. I cut a little hole so that I have a window peek through. All this little lace stuff I made with this little Martha Stewart lace die cutters. So you can use a lot of different things to decorate and embellish these houses. Thank you guys so much for coming. Before I sign off, I just wanted to share with you a source where you can find some more information about Emilio Sanchez that the Harn put together. So these are architectural studies inspired by Emilio Sanchez. There's this really sweet video right here talking about his life and his work. Another exercise showing a project that you can do at home, creating a building in his style, relying on lots of contrast and shadow. And then here, several paper cutting activities that you can do. A puzzle. This one is from Morales. Just a little cross that you can cut and fold that goes with the partnership with PD Paper Details. So thanks again, everybody, for coming to Zoom. I'm planning on, should be streaming to YouTube now. We'll see how that goes. But I'm planning on, I will share this link for the video that you can look back on. And I'm going to be looking forward to seeing all of your books in person. So thank you so very much. And see you soon.